Welcome to another Clockify interview. I'm Natalia, and today I'll be talking to Catie Fenn. I would like to thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time to come to this interview today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Okay, so I know that you're currently like an entrepreneur and you're a course creator, a life coach, and you've called yourself a soul guide as well, which sounds really amazing. I'd like to dig into that and ask you, can you kind of elaborate on that and introduce yourself to our audience so that they can get a picture about you and what you're all about?
Sure. So I think a lot of what I do sort of centers around helping people to come more into being who they really are authentically and living lives that feel like authentic and true to them. And so whether it's through a more traditional life coaching lens or whether it's through more spiritual soul guiding, I call it, ultimately all of these things. And I do it through one-on-one mentorship, through courses, through retreats, or through women's circles that I host, are ultimately just designed to help people stop and pause and connect and ask themselves powerful questions so that they can reveal more of just who they really are and what's true for them. And so that's a lot of what I ultimately am doing. It's helping guide the process for people to have the courage to become who they really are or to do the things they want to do. So I think that's normally for both people. A lot of times it has to do for people with career, but sometimes it's making lifestyle shifts. And other times it's just, letting go of a past version of themselves that they've been so that they can rise into being whoever they are now.
That sounds amazing. So what got you into that? So which point in your career and in your life did you realize that you wanted to start helping other people ultimately decide probably what you kind of felt as well, right?
Yeah, it happened pretty naturally in that I started myself to become really into meditation and mindfulness at a time in my life. I was really stressed out. I was a lawyer at the time and I just started practicing. And so I started meditation just because I was so stressed. And then through myself taking that time to pause, to journal, to start doing these practices just because I wanted to manage my stress and anxiety, it ended up awakening, more of this space to actually start to connect with myself of like, what do I value? Who do I want to be? And so these questions. So I was so excited about it that I started to talk to different people about it or would naturally kind of strike up these conversations. And ultimately, that's how I started to guide other people. It was just always that I've been like a little bit further ahead than some people on their journey. So I just have always had the perspective of like, oh, well, it's okay for you to potentially want to pivot your life or who you are or take a different path. And so just through my own journey, I just started to get into a lot of those conversations with people naturally. And then eventually those conversations became, me coaching other people more formally or guiding other people. And then from that too, it started to be teaching other people what are tools, how do you meditate, how do you practice mindfulness, what are the questions to ask yourself if you're on sort of a personal growth or spiritual journey. And that's really how it all evolved. It was never like, I never really was like, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to do this. It was just, it was like really a natural, I was excited about it. And when I'm excited about something, I'll talk to other people about it. And those conversations naturally led into me landing into this work.
Would you say it was a spontaneous journey to where you are now? Or at the time, did you kind of feel that you were going to end up here? Or was it just, kind of a thing along the way?
About, I would say maybe a year in, I started to think, okay, I just knew intuitively. I'm like, I'm being led down this path. And the thing that was spontaneous about it was that I didn't plan as much the how and the steps of how it would happen. It was just like an inner knowing. Like I just knew that at some point I was going to be doing this full time and I didn't know how that was going to happen. And so I just every year would connect with my intuition or see what I was feeling inspired about. And then I would create that next thing. And so over time, it just, happened. And I think that really like, I think of that now as more of a feminine approach to our goals, to getting to where we want to be, a different approach, a more pragmatic, logical. These are the steps that we take that a lot of us take in society in particular when it comes to our careers is great. And that's what I did in my previous career. And like, I just didn't want to I didn't know the steps to get to where I was in the first place here. But the other thing was I just kind of liked the idea of no pressure. I would just follow what was feeling good. I would follow the next steps. And eventually I did have this inner knowing that it would lead me to where I wanted to be. But it ultimately took me 6 years to build out everything such that I was able to leave my career completely behind and do this full time.
That's quite a while, 6 years, but I would say it worked out pretty well for you, right? So it was worth it. So would you say that was kind of, as you call it, a spiritual smackdown, right? That's the phrase that you like to use. Would you please explain to our audience what that actually means to you and what the concept is about?
I think that, often we go through these times where we're going through the motions and we find ourselves. So for me, for example, I found myself as a lawyer and I was, living in this place I always wanted to live. And it was sort of like I had this life checklist of things that I wanted or thought that I wanted. And then all of a sudden I was in them and it felt good for a minute. And then all of a sudden I just started to feel like I was going through the motions. Like I wasn't excited about things. I wasn't feeling like myself. And so what started to happen is that I just started to feel more and more disconnected from myself. What ended up going through that is that eventually I'm like going through the motions and feeling less and less like myself. And a lot of us kind of become not walking zombies, but in some ways we're asleep. We're not paying attention. We're not connected to ourselves, our vibrancy, our lives. In a lot of ways, we're more passive. And eventually that just started to make me feel worse and worse and worse. And my own smackdown was all of a sudden just waking up one morning and realizing like, wow, I have this amazing life. And like, I don't feel like myself. I don't feel good in it. So it forced me to take a look at like, wait, what's happening here? Like, who am I being? What am I living? Do I want any of this? Do I want to actually live in this place? Or did my city just tell me this was like the best place to live? Do I want to be in this career? Or was I just told that because I had these skills, like I just should be a lawyer? Do I actually like that? Or do I not? Who are these people I'm hanging out with? Do I even like any of them? All of a sudden it was like this awakening of, wait a second, you can't keep living this way. You're going to continue to feel like a zombie. And that awakens you to all of a sudden, it's like you turn on the light in a room and you're like, wait, what is any of this stuff? It's like you've been in the attic for so long and all of a sudden the light goes on and you're like, yeah, I need to sort through these boxes and see what's happening here.
So you felt that kind of internally, your feelings weren't aligning in your life externally, right? And you weren't sure why. So that kind of got you to a spiritual smackdown, as you called it, right?
Yeah. And to me, the spiritual smackdown too was like the first time where I really felt and heard that inner voice so loud. Like I've been so disconnected from my intuition, which now is like the biggest thing that guides me in everything. And I had been so disconnected from that voice. And all of a sudden in that moment, I heard this voice come through that was like so authoritative, like enough, stop it. You have to figure what you're doing next. And then that was, that's really what began everything.
So in general, what would your advice be to people? So what are kind of the distractions that people usually engage in prior to these spiritual smackdowns and prior to these like awakenings of figuring out that they're not really in the right place? What would you say is like the biggest distraction or like time wasting things that we engage in?
Well, I would say one of the biggest ones now for people is social media. Because I think that, I would say that would be like an overarching massive one. That's even more so now than at the time when I was going through this, because I think what's happening right now is those things are designed to take away your attention and to keep you on them. But it's also, it'll keep you also consuming other people's lives and what is or isn't true for them, but you're consuming other people. And what that does is it takes us away from our own natural connection to what's true for us. So you might decide like, oh, I want what they have, or I want to be living what they want, but it might still not be true for you. It might just be like another movie that you're deciding that you want to watch. And so I would say social media is the biggest time suck, and the thing that will also, for a lot of people, either make them not, think that they want something different, but not know what it is, and then get confused about what it is they actually want. Social media is a big one. Another thing that I think people distract themselves with a lot as well is just like, knowing maybe that they are aren't feeling that good, but they just continue to move forward. So I also just see like people distract themselves with their work. They, instead of wanting to make changes in their work, they'll just complain about it. So I also just feel like things that people like complaining, like I've noticed a lot of people will just complain to me about what they don't like in their relationships or friendships or dating or their careers. And instead of like asking the question of it, okay, well, if I'm complaining about it, what is it about this? What would I want to change? What would be different? And so I think complaining and continuing to do things you're complaining about and social media would be the two biggest things I think that keep people stuck. And then just overall busyness, just keeping ourselves busy, distracting ourselves, numbing out, whether it's like TV or drinking or eating or whatever. Everyone's got different things that they do to numb out from having to be with themselves.
I definitely agree. We use a lot of these distractions to take away from the real issues. But what about complaining? So it's really easy to slip into that, right? To kind of just vent to someone. So how do you kind of, realize that you're doing that? Because I don't think a lot of people actually have, that amount of objectiveness to realize that they're complaining too much. So what would you say? Are there any like points in time when you're overdoing it, when it's not just a regular vent and you're just complaining too much and you need to stop?
Yeah, I think that for people, they might be able to just tell, like, is this feeling good? Because, venting, getting things off our chest is great. And that's positive. So that ultimately, when you're unloading that, might actually feel good. You might be like, yeah, okay, I feel so much lighter now at the end of the conversation. But I think what will lead people eventually to hopefully awaken and be like, wait a second, let me have awareness of what I'm doing now. You notice that you're not feeling good. It's like you're complaining every day and you're not feeling any better about it. And so I think just having that simple awareness of like, do I feel good doing this? Does this feel, like it's making me feel lighter or more open? Because the other thing is if it's not, it also having that awareness of, is this making me feel good? It'll bring you back into your heart, versus a lot of the time when we're complaining, we're in the mind and we're just like getting stuck in the stories up there. And so if you have that awareness of like, how do I actually feel here, and trying to bring it into your body, I think that can help people too, to understand like, oh, wait, is this actually serving me or not? Is this actually helping me or not? And like, what is this really about? Because complaining is one of the easiest things for our minds to do to protect us from something that feels uncomfortable. And so also, if you start to come into the body, it might unlock for you what it's actually like. What are you actually complaining about? What are you actually not feeling good about? And that, for people, if they feel, if they're able to go there, can be a really amazing awakening thing.
And and another thing that you mentioned, so social media. So it's also really difficult, right, to disconnect. I've been practicing that. I think a lot of people try to practice it and limit it as much as possible. But when is the moment that you maybe in your own experience realize that you were doing it too much, or that it is an actual distraction and people need to be more aware of it?
I would say, there's a few times. And especially recently too, I personally found like the onset of TikTok to be also very intense. Like TikTok at first, I didn't like going on. I found it too overwhelming. And then all of a sudden it was weird. Like the more I started to go onto it, the more I feel like this is fun, whether it's the algorithm or whatever. And then what I started to notice was, and I do it with others, so I ended up just having to delete TikTok. I was like, I just actually can't be on there right now. But I think in general, where I start to notice if it's a problem are one of two things. The first would be, do I feel like I'm going to this in moments of spaciousness? Because I know that moments of spaciousness are actually, the most profound. It's where the best ideas come through, and that clarity. And so what I'll notice for myself, as I'm waiting for the streetcar, as I'm waiting, anytime in between things, if I'm just constantly going to my phone in those pauses throughout my day, that to me is always an indication like, okay, I'm just trying to entertain myself instead of enjoying this spaciousness. So that would be the first thing, if I notice that I'm going to it too often to entertain myself. Instead of being in the spaciousness. And the second thing would just be like, is it not making me feel good? Am I finding that like I'm consuming stuff and ultimately it ends up not making me feel like I've learned anything, like I'm inspired? Does it make me just feel bad about myself, or like I'm not where I should be in my life? And that for me, it's like, from a higher self perspective, I know I'm always where I'm supposed to be. So all of a sudden, if I'm getting things that make me feel like I'm not doing enough or I'm not where I'm supposed to be, I know that that's a slippery slope. So that's also where I'll limit it, not only in like who I'm consuming and where I'm consuming, but also just the amount, because it just means that my mind's probably a bit sensitive. And so I'll try and limit it at that point. As well.
I see. So basically, following what your heart tells you at the moment, right? So whether you're feeling it or not. Okay. So what about so you've deleted TikTok completely, right? You just said
For now, yeah, just until I can engage in a normal way. I was like, I just know myself. Like it was becoming, it was too enticing and entertaining. And I would always leave it being like, I haven't learned it. Like, what did I just do? I literally kept being like, I don't know what I just did for the last 30 minutes on there. I didn't learn anything. I'm like watching these cat videos. Like my life is not better because of this. And then I was like, I need to just stop and get off this for a bit.
So consciously picking what you spend your time on, even though something might appear as like really fun or enticing, maybe it's not always a good idea. I can agree with you. That one. I think a lot of people have felt that before. So what about, do you use any tools or any techniques to kind of help you refocus on what's important in your life or in your work that you do?
Yeah. So I think part of it was that I really wanted to, like, even when I was started using the Clockify app too, because I really wanted to actually be aware of how much time I was spending on each thing. Because ultimately, and I say this to every client, like you can have it all, but not all at once, which means that usually, there's a couple areas of your life that are out of focus. And that means that other things you're not spending as much time on. But I have to be aware of how much time I'm spending on each thing, because then I can see if there's an imbalance toward the things that I actually value. So for me personally, I started to look at, okay, how much time am I actually sitting down and doing stuff that's related to my work? Or when it comes to friendships and community, like I moved a couple of years ago and it was during COVID. So it's like a slow process to rebuild the community in a new place. So I'm also looking at, okay, I say that I want to have more of a community here, but like how much time am I actually spending doing anything about that? Or where am I, spending too much time on things? Like I have a tendency to, I love being active. So I'm just like, okay, well, I'll just go like to another yoga class. And like, that takes up so much time. So even with the things that I love, it's also making sure that I'm not, that I'm able to balance the things that are about me, and I'm not spending much time on the things or not enough time on the things that I say that are important to me. Because I think if not, then we all have patterns, things that aren't actually helpful to us or aren't actually aligned with what we want. So.
Yeah, true. We stick to things that aren't always helpful, even if they're fun. As you said, useful. Yoga is really good, but if you spend like 10 hours a day or 5 hours a day on it, it's not that useful then after.
It's like I would do that.
I know. But you just can't, because there's not enough time in the day. So hence that's why you just mentioned that you started using Clockify. So why did you pick Clockify out of all of the apps? There's loads of time tracking apps. So what made you how did you find Clockify, and what made you stick to using Clockify?
I Googled it. I just went on a Googling thing, and it was like in this other blog. And then I downloaded a couple of them, and I found that Clockify was just like the most intuitive, the most straightforward, and the easiest. Like, I just think that a lot of, same as like other tracker apps, it's almost like when it's just, anyway, it was just the easiest, the most intuitive. And also it helped me for like the thing I clock it most for my work. And it was just the easiest for me to actually see it. Like, I like that there's a manual, and then there's also the timer version. And it just helped me to see cumulatively, okay, each week, what am I doing for a whole month? How much time did I spend on this? And it was just the easiest and most intuitive and the most like streamlined to do that. So I really enjoyed it.
No, that's nice to hear. Also for your feedback. So I know that you also use Clockify for other areas of your life, right? So which areas of your life do you use Clockify for, and where do you find it most useful for you?
Yeah, again, the main one that I'm using it for is definitely anything that's work related. So just making sure that I'm actually focusing on things that are tasks, just because my business is so much intertwined with who I am and the things that I already like doing. Having that awareness of, okay, what are you actually doing tasks that are specific to the business, as opposed to things that you just enjoy doing. So that's the biggest way that I've been using Clockify. And then I've also just been tracking too. I use other different tracks too, just to make sure that, how much have I been meditating? How much have I been meditating? How much time have I been practicing, in a morning practice? And so just making sure that I'm actually cumulatively doing those things. It's also now made me more aware in general of just my time, of where it was all going. And so it's made me much more considerate now outside of the app as well. It's like, all right, where has my time been going? It's just been, even though I only am tracking mainly meditation and so my practices and then also work stuff, I would say outside of it, since I started using it, it's made me so much more aware of where's my time going. For example, that I was like, I need to delete TikTok because that's like a 30-minute just chunk, if not more, that's just like out the window now.
Did you time how much time you were spending on TikTok on Clockify?
No, I did that because those apps, like on your phone, it already would do it for me. And then I was like, enough. Yeah.
Okay. And so you just mentioned the outside of Clockify has made you more aware even when you're not using the app. So in your life outside of the digital world. So what about do you use any, or do you practice any time managing techniques outside, so that are not like digital tools or apps or Clockify? Do you use any time management techniques, or how do you manage your time outside of the internet?
The main way is I use the Pomodoro method if I know that I really need to focus on something. So like timing 25 minutes and then taking a break and then doing that again. That'd be one of like the main things that I do. And the other way as well is that I just feel like I try and take pauses throughout different transition points in the day. So let's say normally I also change what I'm doing in the morning versus during the afternoon versus during the evening. And so just having those conscious pauses of like, okay, I'm taking a break now. I finished this type of, let's say I normally do very focused work all in one chunk. So I'll say, okay, I finished this focused chunk. Now I'm going to take like 30 minutes. I'm going to do whatever and just chill. And then I'm going to go into more creative work after this. And then I'm going to, I'm very conscious of the transition points between my days, because I think that that's where I know for a lot of clients, at least, that's where they lose a lot of time, because all of a sudden they've left work, but they're still thinking about it so much because they didn't consciously like tune in and say, okay, this is different. Just getting yourself present and mindful back to like, what are you doing now? What are you doing for the next few hours? And I think that that's the other biggest thing that I do, is having conscious transition points throughout the day where I'm saying, okay, let go of that completely and let's get into a different mode of being present with what you're focusing on for the next few hours.
Does that take time though to kind of make it easier? Because I feel that probably a lot of people, I've experienced that I'm kind of good at it now, like mentally disconnecting, but it takes a lot of time, right? So like how can people maybe adapt that technique to kind of understand how to actually do it? Because it's really easy to say to just disconnect, but we all know it's not as easy as done as said. So is there techniques that you use, like a certain sentence that you'd say to yourself, or any techniques?
Yeah, I would say the 3 top things or 4, or here are a few different things that you can do. The first thing would be to meditate. So a lot of people, I recommend meditating right in the transition point from when they finish work until when they're coming into their evening or morning, like whenever you finish. For me, for years, that's what I did when I used to come home. I was always stressed and thinking about work. And so I would always meditate for 5 minutes, and I would do the mantra of inhale, let, exhale, go, like consciously saying to myself, let go. And that only was 5 minutes, but just coming in and I'd go straight to the bedroom and do that for 5 minutes was really helpful. And that just took 5 minutes. And same thing, I would time it, inhale, let, exhale, go. And so that can be a really helpful tool. So let go and meditation. Another one that you can do too is just repeat to yourself, release, 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 release. So again, for 5 minutes, just saying that to yourself and trying to get your shoulders to relax, and just imagine like relaxing your face. That can be really a helpful transition point tool for people. Some people really enjoy going for a walk. I personally don't, but I have lots of clients that do this, and we'll just go for like a 10-minute walk, or if they have a dog, they're using that time just to connect in with nature when they go on that walk, because connecting in with nature is another really helpful thing that helps people kind of just transition out. Another thing that can be really helpful for people is just doing something that signifies, like some type of ritual that signifies for you, okay, that we're shifting gears here. So something as simple as lighting a candle or washing your hands and letting go of the day, or changing your clothes can also just help in your mindset of just, okay, we're doing something different here. So the candle's been lit, we washed our hands, we changed our clothes, and like we're getting rid of today. And ultimately, so much of this is just mindset. So part of it is like these little tools, but ultimately what they're doing is starting to interrupt the mindset pattern of like staying hooked in a moment that you're not in anymore.
That's some solid advice. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure a lot of our audience members will appreciate that a lot. So that's kind of ties into developing healthy habits, right? And I would say that that's quite an integral aspect of your coaching method, right? Developing all of these healthy habits to help you disconnect, and amongst other things. So could you share like some other concepts that your coaching method is based on as well?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is creating spaciousness. I think that that's the biggest piece, because I think a lot of people are like, I'm so busy, I don't have time, and blah blah. And the more that you create spaciousness, actually, the more time you seem to have, because you're more present in each moment, and each moment is actually, it takes up less energy. If you just think about it, when we're thinking to the future and when we're thinking in the past, it's like so much energy in our minds. So actually, when we start to practice space or being really present, it actually uses up far less energy. And so in that spaciousness, part of, the biggest thing that I like doing in coaching sessions or through online courses or anything is just, again, creating these pockets of time that are just for you, even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes, just to connect in and be like, how am I doing today? What's on my mind? Am I worried? Like, what do I need? Am I feeling tired? What does my body need? And I think that a lot of us, it's like this self-nurturance ultimately. And I think that those like self-nurturance and then just inquiring with yourself are two of the biggest things that ultimately I think I'm trying to teach people is like, you don't need to spend your whole day connecting with yourself and like nurturing yourself. And I have clients that are like, yeah, Catie, it'd be sweet if I could spend 4 hours doing this. But like for years, I was a lawyer and an entrepreneur. Like I truly did not have any time. And those 50 minutes a day that I took to connect with myself, like, are what sustained me in those years of my life that I was like, arguably, I should have burnt out, but didn't. So I think that 50-minute period of like sitting with yourself, asking yourself what you need, nurturing yourself in that way, and then also just inquiring and seeing like, what do I need? And then because the answers will always come, like you might be like, oh, I'm actually feeling a little dehydrated. I should be drinking more water. Or like, oh, my body's feeling really stiff. I kind of, I want to go for a walk later today. Or wow, I'm feeling exhausted. I'm going to cancel my plans for tonight. And that simple awareness of just connecting in with yourself each day, asking yourself those questions and just seeing how you feel and how you're doing, like as if you were talking to a best friend, is really powerful. And then that creates, more gentleness with ourselves, which then creates more self-compassion, which then leads to more self-love, which then leads to more confidence, which then leads us to be able to have energy to do the things we want to do. So it all kind of ties together, but it really starts with that.
Yeah, it's like a crucial starting point. And what about, in your opinion, how important is knowledge is having like self-awareness and of our tendencies in general, and becoming the best versions of ourselves, basically?
Yeah, I think that part of what I just find it kind of fun to realize what are our tendencies, and then just to notice, is this helpful to me or not? And also like the other lens and so part of it is like, okay, can we transcend and shift some of the tendencies that we have that are getting us into trouble? Like you react on someone and you're like, dang it, I wish I hadn't said that. Or, all of a sudden you're burnt out and you're like, dang it, I wish that I had caught this earlier. But sometimes like my other perspective too is just having this awareness of our tendencies sure can help us be happier, because it's helping us not be so reactive in the ways that we are. But I also think of it now as like these tendencies that we have are just symptoms of something being off. And so part of it is, I think, like some of our tendencies are so ingrained, and like we could spend the rest of our lifetime trying to shift some of our core tendencies. You know, you might like not have it for 4 months and all of a sudden you're being super reactive again, or like, you know, binging on social media or whatever. And so part of it though is I think having this awareness, again, it's like this self-nurturance and compassion of like, oh wow, okay, I'm having this symptom of this thing that I do when something's off. And then that also just leads us to that self-care, that self-love of like, how are you? What's going on? Like this symptom showed up. So it means that like you're not okay. And I think it's just, again, learning how to, we use these tendencies. Some of them we can eliminate, but some of them just to have that awareness of like, okay, if something's happening and it's not feeling good, then it means that there's something off within us. And then that can indicate to people like, okay, well, what do I need? And to be able to just, you know, heal and be with and love themselves in that way is, I think, really powerful.
And one of like the most crucial aspects of being your best self version is achieving an adequate work-life balance, right? Would you agree on that?
Yeah.
And what would you point out as some common mistakes that you've noticed in your life and in your career during coaching sessions? You know, what in relation to like employees and employers, are there any unrealistic expectations that we set upon ourselves or that employers set upon us?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that leads to people burning out or not having any balance is, again, that lack of autonomy. So this has like been shown in a lot of studies too, that feeling like you don't have control over your time. And so that looks like for people getting emails or calls outside of their work hours, or feeling like they knew what their assignments were and then getting a last minute thing that they have to help on or somebody asked, like feeling like your time is not your own is it. And so therefore feeling out of balance because you already have so much and then you're being asked to do more is the number one thing that will lead people to kind of that dissatisfaction. But then I think and then the way that we combat that is making sure that you have at least a pocket of the day that's just for you. So that 15-minute, 10-minute practice, like I was talking about, because I think that the other thing that gets people hooked and I think is unrealistic is that they think that they have to spend so much time, you know, with themselves or present with themselves or family or whatever else. And like, that's just not realistic because you spend more time. I think work is like the hardest thing, right? Because you spend more time at work than you do hours wise with some of those other areas of your life. And so it's more about like helping people to consider quality versus quantity. And that I think is like one of the biggest things is people think like, oh, I would just wish that I could be more balanced. But then, you know, it's mainly about the areas outside of their work life. How can they be more present in them so that they feel like they're quality? Like, I think actually the biggest thing is that people are so burnt out when they finish work that then like they're not even paying attention to the other hours that they have outside of work. And so even when I have clients who are like trying to build side hustles on the side of their work and have a family and friends and all these things, I think the biggest awareness that people miss in this work-life balancing is that they're not actually aware of how potent the hours outside of work are, or these little time slots that they can have throughout the day. So that all work day, you know, do you take a 10-minute break? Do you take a 30-minute break? Do you take an hour break at lunch? Like, I think a lot of people just stop taking lunch breaks or stop taking coffee breaks or whatever, which is like ridiculous, right? And so, yeah, so that like those little things can be really potent. I think that's helpful.
So you mentioned you think that a lot of people are simply just so burnt out that they don't even have the time. So are there any like techniques? You mentioned a lot of really useful advice. What about like in which way could like a time tracking app help someone avoid this burnout at work, for example? So as you said, it's like a crucial part and it can affect you largely, especially if you don't know how to balance it. Do you think that a time tracking app could maybe help you, you know, ease the burnout symptoms at work?
Yeah. So a time checking app. So that 3 biggest causes of burnout specifically are personal ineffectiveness. So feeling like you aren't doing a good job, like you're dropping the ball, or like you can never get on top of your to-do list. The second thing is depersonalization. So just with like everything being online, or not actually going to see a coworker in person if you can, or call them or whatever, instead of sending an email or a text or Slack or whatever. So not having enough human connection. And the third thing is just feeling emotionally exhausted, like you're so spent, you don't have anything to give anyone else. So I think that a time checking app sort of helps with all of those, because the first thing is, if you're like, I find for me, if I pull up the app and I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm about to start a task, I'm going to start timing it. It tells me, okay, I'm in present mode. Like, I'm going to be really present with this and I'm going to focus. And then when I notice myself starting to like burn out or get tired, I'll stop it and be like, okay, this is an indication to me of I need to go up and take a break right now. So I think even starting to be aware of, when am I starting a task? When am I notice that I'm burning, will also give you awareness of like, what's your maximum? So I know for me, at around 25 to 35 minutes, my brain needs a break. And I also know that for me, after cumulatively 4 hours of work, I need like a longer break, because I just can't like focus. And I think having that awareness helps you to know yourself better and know kind of what your limits are. It also then, for you, if you're timing it specifically, helps you to be like, okay, I'm going to do this task and now I'm going to time it. And it'll help you to be like, I'm checking things off. I'm feeling effective, because again, that's one of the number one things that leads to burnout. The second thing is, with that depersonalization factor, one thing that I'd recommend for people is, and this is what I did, like as a lawyer, we were always had to bill our hours. So I was used to this, like time checking when I practice. And like, okay, so you time your task and then you notice that you have a break. Instead of you just, doing whatever, going on social media, using that time of like, I'm going to get up now and I'm going to reach out to that coworker. Or if you're in office, which most people aren't now anyway, but like, I'm going to see that person in person, or I'm going to reach out to a friend. Like, just using those breaks to actually have some type of human contact is actually really important. So that would be the other thing. It's like, okay, you're off the clock, so to speak, for a bit. Like, go connect with someone in some way, or even if that means like you're going to walk to the coffee shop near your house and like you're going to look at the barista. Like, that's such a small thing, but that really can help to prevent burnout. And then the last thing with that emotional exhaustion is, if you're tracking your time, then it'll show you sort of what's your maximum, what's your capacity right now. And I think that that's helpful too, of like, wow, I can't even do an hour of focusing here without feeling like I want to stick hot nails into my eyes. Shows you like, okay, then you really got to connect in and nurture, see what you need.
And is there, if there was a way for you to give us like a crash course right now, like a short summary of how would you explain to us to live like the best version of our lives, if you could?
I think that like what's really helpful for people is do the exercise of just thinking about like, what is your ideal day ever? Like, if you were to wake up and you were to be like living in a way that feels really good. So like, where do you wake up? How do you wake up? How do you spend your morning? What do you do? Then to incorporate even a work thing at that, of like, and sometimes people don't even know what their work would be. They're like, I just want to be at the beach. But then I'm like, okay, but think about like, if you were though, I feel, because the idea would be like, even if they're at the beach, how do you feel when you're at the beach? Well, I feel at peace there. I feel like I have no worries. So great. Like, your ideal day is a day where you wake up, you feel at peace, you do this morning routine, you go work out, you're feeling so good. Maybe it's like, and then I start work at noon and I work for 3 hours or whatever, like, I think that letting people just start to envision what they want their lives to look like ideally can just be a really powerful reflection. The way that you can do that too is like, look at inspiration from the people that you know, or people that you do see online. That's where social media can be so helpful, is getting a glimpse into like, oh wait, okay, I see that person is able to do this. Like, that would be so amazing for me too. I think that starting to have that awareness and letting yourself dream can be really like one of the most powerful things. Because I think, again, a lot of us end up going through the motions because we're only shown a few models of like what life is supposed to be. It's like, okay, you work these amount of hours generally on these days, you spend your vacations doing this, you live here, you have a family, and like, those aspects are amazing. And also, it's not like, we're all different and we all ultimately have things that are better suited to us. And I think that the world now is slowly shifting so that eventually, hopefully, all of us would have that flexibility to actually be living in like a way that fuels us, that makes us feel the way that we want to feel. So that I think is like the first thing would be just let yourself dream a vision of what's your ideal day, like what would be your perfect day, and let yourself start to consider that and even go there, because a lot of people are like, I can't even go there because it feels so unrealistic. But that's your first thing, like get over the fact that it feels unrealistic to you right now, because it is possible. And so just starting to let people write that down is, I think, a helpful first place to start.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing first place to start. It's really good advice. I'd have to pay more attention to that sentence. That's really cool. So, okay, before we kind of finish this interview, I've got just 2 more questions. So could you advise anyone that's maybe not tracking their time, why they should start using Clockify today, for example?
Okay, well, if you're not using your time is going to get away from you. And I think that it's just a really amazing habit to be aware of where our time is going. There's always that famous quote that's like, you think you're busy? You've got the same amount of hours in the day as Beyonce, or like, you think of anyone who for you feels like someone that you're like, whoa, they've done so much, right? Like we all actually have the same amount of time in the day. And so I think, like I have found with the app too, the more that I started tracking my time just for one specific area of my life, then all of a sudden I became so much more aware in other areas of my life. And ultimately, the more that you're tracking your time, the more that you can spend it doing things that you actually like doing. And then that leads to so much more fulfillment. So that's a reason to start, so that it doesn't get away from you and so that you can actually be spending time on the things that you value.
Exactly. That's the most important aspect, at least for me. Okay, and last but not least, would you care to share maybe some new exciting plans in your future, and anything that our audience, maybe should know about your plans in your future?
Yeah, I guess, I'm always in a space of just of being in the mystery of like, what do I feel like right now is where I want to be spending my time. So personally, when I'm finding that there are things that don't feel good any longer, like there are certain courses that I used to teach that now I'm like, it just doesn't feel good for me to teach this thing anymore. And so I guess my plans now are like, I'm shifting a little bit in terms of what I feel like teaching, of how I feel like teaching, of what things I want to continue to do, and what things I feel like I'm letting go of now. And so the one thing though that I feel very consistent on and excited about is, I think now that I've been in coaching and courses for so long, is I think I'm just having a shift of really wanting to just share that with other people so that they can do that type of work too. Like I think, being one-to-one with people is the best. And so my thing that I'm most excited about now is starting to be able to teach other people how to coach, how to teach meditation, how to lead women's circles, how to lead retreats, because I think that those spaces are so helpful in helping other people to learn to live, in a more fulfilled way. So that's actually what I'm feeling most excited about in my future plans, is to start teaching other people how to teach and how to coach and how to guide, because I think that we need more people like on the ground, so to speak, doing this work. So that's what I'm most excited about. And just like seeing, I'm kind of being led back. I left law 4 years ago, and I'm being led back into that community in a different way. Like I'm starting to do a lot of time management and burnout and how to thrive as a lawyer workshops. And so that's another thing that for me is very, like, I like sharing that now, because I think that people have this vision of like, I hate my job, I want to move somewhere else. And I actually didn't hate law at all. I actually really enjoyed it, but it's just curious, right?
The video is frozen.
Oopsie.
Oh, there you are. Your video froze completely. So sorry about that. I've got no idea.
No. Oh, okay. Hopefully it'll go back. So I guess my the other thing that I'm feeling most excited about right now is aside from being able to teach people now how to coach and how to meditate, or teach meditation, and how to run retreats, is starting to do more work specifically back in sort of corporate, and back for me specifically, my background is in law. So starting to go a lot more into law firms and work with lawyers, teaching them to thrive. And I was just sharing that I want to share that, because I think that a lot of the times we think that our purpose is something different than what we're doing, but our purpose always shifts, and like we'll be always led back into different parts of ourselves, parts of our past. in new ways. And so now I'm just very excited. Like, I think it's kind of cool that 4 years later, I'm being led back into law, but not as a lawyer, in a different way. And I think that that's really, interesting. And that just comes from me following my intuition of like, oh, this feels really exciting. I love working with, this population right now. And so that feels really fun for me.
So yeah, thank you so much, Catie. It was such a pleasure to have met you today. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And seriously, though, I've really enjoyed this app. It's really nice. That's the thing. Like, even now with these like lawyer presentations I'm doing, because I give them tools, I'm like, okay, guys, you need to download this app, because they're used to doing it for billable hours. But then I'm like, they could track, like, what are you doing outside of your work? Like, where's your time going? So I think using it for people like even outside of that is so cool. So
Amazing.
big fan.
That's amazing feedback. We appreciate that a lot. So thank you so much. Hopefully Clockify will continue to serve you on your journey.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you're already doing a good job of it by yourself. And tools only enhance, your work already. So it's lovely to meet you once again. And yeah, I really enjoyed this day. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. Okay, bye.
We hope you enjoyed our interview today. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media.